Welcome to episode 32 of Project 250, a weekly chronicle of the people, places, and events of the American Revolution in the order they occurred. So, without further ado, here's what was happening 250 years ago this week, August 10th to 16th, 1775. As the week begins, on August 10th, John Adams's younger brother, Elihu Adams, who had been widely praised for his heroism at the Battle of Grape Island, died, at age 34, of dysentery following a week-long illness. On August 11th, George Washington wrote to General Gage to protest the mistreatment of American prisoners of war. Washington described how they had been thrown indiscriminately into a common jail appropriated for felons, with no consideration made for officers who were languishing with wounds and sickness, and some of whom had even undergone amputations in such deplorable conditions. Washington urged Gage to set aside political considerations and honor the obligations arising from the rights of humanity and claims of rank. Washington pointed out that the current British attitudes would likely increase the hostility that Gage and his superiors in London claimed to be trying to reduce. Washington closed with a stark warning that unless there was a change in policy, British prisoners of war could expect to receive the same treatment that Americans had received.
If severity and hardship mark the line of your conduct, painful as it may be to me, your prisoners will feel its effects. But if kindness and humanity are shown to ours, I shall with pleasure consider those in our hands only as unfortunate, and they shall receive the treatment to which the unfortunate are ever entitled. I beg to be favored with an answer as soon as possible, and am, sir, your most obedient and very humble servant, George Washington.
On the same day, British General James Grant wrote to Edward Harvey, Adjutant General of the British Army, describing the situation in Boston and warning of the potentially grim prospects ahead, saying,
"We cannot remain during the winter in this place, as our situation must go on worse and that of the rebels better every day."
Also on August 11th, the second phase of the Beeline March concluded when Hugh Stevenson's militia unit arrived in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On August 13th, General Thomas Gage responded to Washington's letter dated August 11th, in which Washington protested the mistreatment of American prisoners of war and the abuse of commissioned officers. Gage stated that he did not recognize any military rank that was not granted by the king. Gage went on to complain about the treatment accorded British prisoners and loyalists by Americans, informing Washington that loyal subjects of the king, who had been captured by rebels, were suffering like slaves to survive each day and facing the daily choice of starvation and rebellion. Gage further noted that Americans who justified the mistreatment of British soldiers and loyalists by citing the abuse of American prisoners were committing acts of cruelty based on falsehoods. Gage appealed to Washington's sense of fairness to help rectify these injustices and counseled him to practice restraint in political discussions, to allow the truth to prevail, and to hold accountable those who deceive and misrepresent others. On the evening of August 14th, just days after George Washington proposed a similar plan to Rhode Island Governor Nicholas Cook, a group of sympathetic Bermudians, along with some American sailors, executed what's come to be known as the Bermuda Gunpowder Plot. Part of an agreement to trade food for gunpowder, they raided the powder magazine at St. George, Bermuda's capital. The group subdued the Lone Guard, then rolled about 100 barrels of gunpowder to the shore. From there, whaleboats transported the barrels to two American ships, the Lady Catherine and the Charleston and Savannah packet, which were waiting just offshore near Tobacco Bay. Half of the seized gunpowder was taken to Charleston, the other half was taken to Philadelphia. On August 15th, Benedict Arnold met with George Washington at Cambridge to discuss plans for the upcoming attack on Quebec. Arnold planned to lead a contingent of 1,000 picked men, skilled in handling bateaux, up the Kennebec River, down the Chaudière, and across the St. Lawrence River to attack Quebec. These men needed to be proficient in navigating the woods and possess a strong knowledge of boats. Arnold believed that the sudden appearance of 1,000 armed troops outside the walls of Quebec would induce the small garrison to surrender with minimal resistance. Arnold wanted to launch the invasion immediately for several reasons. First, his connections among prominent Montreal merchants had pledged to cooperate with the Americans. These merchants also assured Arnold of support from French farmers eager to be freed from the dominance of French landowners. However, the merchants cautioned Arnold that the French would not rise up until an American army was present in Canada. If the Americans waited too long, the French Canadians might lose heart. Another reason for haste was the small British garrison of only 600 regulars stationed in Canada. Given the fact that the British did not expect significant reinforcements until late spring of 1776, the time seemed ripe for an attack. Also on August 15th, at German Flats, now Herkimer, New York, the American Commissioners for Indian Affairs, Volkert P. Dow and Turbot Francis, held a conference with the sachems and warriors of the Six Nations of the Iroquois. This meeting was part of an effort by the Continental Congress to secure the neutrality of the Iroquois Confederacy. Colonel Francis delivered this speech to the 6 Confederate nations that Congress had approved on July 13th and explained that he and Dow represented the 12 United Colonies and were inviting the 6 nations to a conference in Albany. The goal of the meeting was to rekindle the council fire at Albany and discuss the present situation of the 12 United Colonies. Finally this week, on August 16th, at the Third Virginia Revolutionary Convention, Patrick Henry introduced a resolution respecting a Baptist petition. This resolution aimed to allow dissenting clergymen, meaning non-Anglicans, to conduct religious services for soldiers who preferred not to attend Anglican services. Prompted by a petition from Baptist ministers, this resolution marked an important early step toward promoting religious freedom and the separation of church and state. And that's the way it was 250 years ago this week. If you enjoyed this video, please tell a friend. And if you like what you see on this channel, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter, or X, as well as on Substack. Thank you for watching.